Afrikaans and the future of Afrikaans, and there's been quite a lot of discussion and debate at university level, and it's quite a tricky area. I think a lot of Afrikaans, especially white Afrikaans speakers, feel very precious about it and are scared that it might die out, and they need to protect it. I don't share that view. I'm not someone who's like a kind of a taalvechter, I'm not that. I'm not someone who's trying to fight for the language. I love working in the language. I love speaking the language. I wouldn't be trying to fight for its future. I think it does have a future. I think as long as people continue to create in the language and speak the language, it probably does have a future. If we can make people understand what the real history of Afrikaans is, then it does have a future. Afrikaans only really comes into being because of this relationship between the farm owners and the slaves that work for them. And so Dutch is changed in the mouths of the slaves, and over the generations gets taught to the young white children that are being brought up by the slaves, and so that becomes the language. And there's a big debate even in the early 1900s, when Dutch is still the official language in South Africa, and there's there's a whole argument going on about Dutch versus Afrikaans, and you don't speak Afrikaans because it's a colored language. So this is very different to what I was taught and how we grew up in this country. And so this misconception of Afrikaans, because of the politics during the 20th century, when white nationalism starts to use the language as a glue and as a sort of a cultural force which they claim as their own, and then eliminate all other contributions. We start to get this idea that Afrikaans is a white man's language, and obviously many white people in South Africa speak it, but actually more black and colored people speak Afrikaans in South Africa. So I found that enormously exciting and liberating. It was probably one of the most liberating things that I came across, that suddenly I felt I wasn't feeling the guilt, the burden of creating in Afrikaans. The burden came a little bit later, when I started to become the darling of white Afrikaans speakers, and then that was an uncomfortable situation as well. But the politics always get involved and they influence things. That perhaps that whole political idea was a misconception, and that people now need to come around to finding a new pride in their heritage, in their language background and so on. There's something going on at the moment where people are starting to investigate their history and their cultural history and their heritage. I hope it has a future.